Welcome members to the extraordinary Cabinet meeting on the 8th of June 2021. Just run through the procedures. Fire alarm procedures. If the fire alarm is activated, vacate the offices via the stairs. Please do not use the lifts. Assemble in Hawley Square on the Green. Officers will assist you and advise when it is deemed safe to return to the chamber. Please switch off or turn to silent your mobile phones and do not make or receive calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Filming. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? No one? No one? Okay. If any member of the public who objects to the possibility of being filmed, they may wish to take this opportunity to leave the meeting, but as we don't have any filming, we'll move on. I would advise that if filming does take place, anyone in attendance in the public area may have their image captured. I urge anyone filming procedures to avoid filming members of the public, particularly if there are children present. The following members have asked to speak under Council Procedure Rule 20.1. Item 3, Councillor Garner. Item 4, Councillor Austin, Councillor Everett. Item 5, Councillor Garner, Councillor Yates, Councillor Towning. Do any other members wish to speak? Councillor Bailey.
Under which item?
Which item?
Item 5, sorry.
Okay. Apologies. Are there any apologies for absence? No, I think we have a full house. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have an interest to declare in the items of business on the agenda this evening? No? So we move on to the item agenda 3, Margate Town Deal update and next steps. To introduce Councillor Pugh.
Thank you, Leader. This is a very exciting time for Margate, and the town deal will play a considerable part in the regeneration of a significantly important coastal town in the southeast. We are pleased to have the opportunity to continue on a journey of delivering its growth aspirations for the town's residents, businesses and visitors, which are clearly set out in the Margate Town Investment Plan. Within the heads of terms we have been provided, we have been provided with an in-principle allocation of up to £22.2 million against our ask of £29 million in the Town Deal Investment Plan. Since receiving the heads of terms, the Margate Town Deal Board and the project team have been working hard to identify those projects that best meet the priorities for the town's fund and Margate, to ensure that we have a robust programme of projects that will support the vision for regeneration and levelling up. Sorry, it's a bit long. Capital investment in developing a creative land trust, refurbishing and redeveloping the Theatre Royal, improvements to Walpole Bay, the bathing pool and access to the bay, including an opportunity to test business ideas relating to coastal wellbeing and access to the sea, will help to create jobs, skills and employment pathways. Investment in the Oval Bandstand and Skate Park will provide opportunities to engage the communities living in the most deprived areas of Margate and will aim to encourage, engage and support young people in the town. Improving the public realm, enabling people to move around Margate and Cliftonville more easily will help spread the growth opportunities and improve the look of the town centre and coastal strip in Cliftonville. Investment in some of Margate's heritage assets will support the future of these much loved buildings and will enable them to grow and take advantage of the town's economic growth. We've been asked to note this update report on the Margate Town Deal as the programme moves into the second stage of its development, putting the business cases together that will provide a roadmap for delivery. I look forward to hearing more detail about the delivery and the progress of the Margate Town Deal Board and the project team over the coming months.
Thank you, Councillor Pugh. Speakers under 20.1, Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Leader. We believe it is paramount that the projects associated with the Margate Town Deal are progressed with full transparency in relation to how decisions are made and and how the money is spent. Key to this is, we believe, is the involvement of the People's Panel, which I understand is to grow in size from 20 to 50 people, representing the various sections of the local community who will be benefiting from these projects. The panel could and should play a key role in overseeing the projects and ensuring full community engagement. It is important that all aspects of the project, especially all financial transactions, should be made public and explained. Government guidance for town funds sets out the standards regarding transparency of meetings and papers, with the default position being that all are open to the public, and I hope we will be committing to this level of transparency, including for all funding transactions. All the data will be there, it just needs to be made available publicly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Chief Exec, would you like to respond?
Yes, of course, Chairman. Chair, sorry, apologies, Chair. Yes, absolutely. I can confirm that obviously these are matters for the Margate Town Deal Board. And we are already sharing a lot of information. There's a specific website allocated on behalf of the board where you will find a range of information in relation to the Margate Town Deal Board, including the, as you quite rightly pointed out, the People's Panel, who are having a very active role in respect of this project. Louise, I don't know if there's anything else you would like to add to that?
Yeah, so as you said, we are looking to increase the number of people on the People's Panel. We've had some people drop off because other commitments, and we're trying to make it a very representative panel to make sure that the projects that are already identified in the investment plan, so we're not looking at developing new projects, are representative of those people, businesses and visitors in Margate and what we're looking at to deliver. In terms of the financial transparency, we're currently working with central government on their monitoring and evaluation requirements, which includes monitoring on all elements of financial at an investment plan level and at a specific project level. So that's something that we've been talking to finance about, how we can represent that and show that, because at the moment it's a series of indicators and spreadsheets, but to make sure that people understand the way in which that money is being spent and the way the projects are being delivered.
Thank you, Louise. Would you like to move?
Thank you, Leader. I move the motion that we consider and note this update report.
Do I have a seconder? Second, Chair. Do we all agree? Agree. Okay, we can move on now to item 4, Ramsgate Future Initiative and Levelling Up Fund. I will introduce this. We welcome the opportunity to provide to Thanet by central government as priority 1 area for the recently announced Levelling Up Fund. The priority of the Levelling Up Fund is to focus resources on areas of deprivation in education and skills, employment, productivity, and to those areas that need support for economic growth and recovery following the impact of the pandemic. Thanet has some significant hotspots in the district where levelling up, as set out by central government, is needed. 2/3 of the most deprived lower super output areas are in Margate, and an accessible offer from the Ministry of House, Communities and Local Government for the town deal will support the town's levelling up requirement. The other third are in Ramsgate, and significant government investment is required to help drive regeneration and job growth. The submission of a bid to the Levelling Up Fund will complement other opportunities that are available to Thanet, such as the successful Future High Street Fund bid, Margate's Town Deal offer of up to 22.2 million and the Heritage Action Zones. This funding opportunity will support the delivery of regeneration projects in Ramsgate, which will undoubtedly support the whole district's economic recovery and levelling up of its communities. We know that the people of Ramsgate want job creation, opportunities for young people, enhancements of the Royal Harbour and investment to support the regeneration of the Port of Ramsgate. Improvements to the public realm and designing out opportunities for crime. Regeneration of leisure and retail spaces to encourage new businesses is also important to them. The Ramsgate Levelling Up bid will help to do some of this, and the wider town investment plan for Ramsgate will include those things that cannot be picked up by the bid. 20 million in capital might sound a lot, but further work will need to be done by all stakeholders to benefit from this investment from central government. There are a number of things that we understand are required for the Levelling Up Fund. Delivery will need to start within the 2021-22 financial year. All delivery will be required by March 2024. There is up to £20 million in investment. It is a capital fund, and the government is encouraging bids to include local financial contributions representing at least 10% of total costs. Although the funding contribution does not form part of the gateway criteria for the fund, there is an expectation a contribution will be expected from private sector stakeholders, such as developers, if they stand to benefit from a specific project. Therefore, there will be no expectation that the council will be underwriting any financial contributions referenced by 10% match in the government's narrative that are required from the private sector. The recommendations are: I would like to propose the recommendation that a Levelling Up bid be submitted to the 18th of June deadline, and amend the second recommendation to delegate authority to the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council for final sign-off of the Levelling Up bid. Cabinet would also add a recommendation that the Council will not make a financial contribution in any form within the 10% financial contribution encouraged in the prospectus. Thank you. Those speaking under 20.1, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Leader. I was privileged to be part of a meeting over lunchtime, an online meeting with Ramsgate Town Council and with consultants and colleagues here. And I have to say this is a really exciting plan, and speaking as a Ramsgate councillor, we are fully behind it. We'd love to see other things included, and you alluded, Leader, to further work on the Ramsgate Future projects, because Ramsgate Town Council has a series of ideas, and various of the community groups, the Ramsgate Tunnels, the Granville Theatre and so on, have a variety of really well worked up proposals, and it would be great to see these coming forward as well. Ramsgate really needs this. The statistics we were shown today were shocking in terms of Ramsgate's levels of deprivation. We have youth unemployment at 4 times the national average. We've had no growth in jobs in the last 10 years, in comparison with 10% growth in Kent and 5% growth across Thanet. So it really will make a difference, this focus on jobs and training, but we do need to see the other projects happening as well. The other thing I wanted to say was that people in Ramsgate have responded really well. There's been 700 and odd responses in a very short period of time. People are really keen to see this happen, but going back to what Councillor Garner said earlier, openness and transparency, as much information as possible about what's going on, about what's included in the bid and what isn't once it's gone in, and as much information as possible about how other projects that the community has come up with may be funded in the future and when, will be very, very much appreciated. Thank you.
Yes, I'd just like to add that I also obviously came in on this quite late because of the change of administration, but we've found it very exciting, and I regard this as a building, the foundations and the building block to build up. But we need the private investment, and hopefully this will encourage the larger corporates to take a big interest in Thanet. And yes, priority is for jobs, especially for the young folk of Thanet. Thank you. Councillor Everett.
Yeah, thank you, Leader, and I welcome your enthusiasm for this project, obviously, as I've been key to bringing it forward in my previous capacity as Leader and Cabinet Member. I'm not going to reprise my reservations about this kind of funding from central government, which cannot replace the lost revenue funding which this council has experienced over the last 10 years. But I welcome the opportunity for Thanet to benefit from these funds, and obviously I'm particularly keen that this particular bid should be directed towards Ramsgate, because we've all recognised that there is very significant deprivation in Margate, and the council and other agencies have worked hard to address that. but there is a feeling in Ramsgate that Ramsgate misses out as a consequence of that. So this time I think the council really has to show its support for Ramsgate and put its weight behind Ramsgate. And I understand members who represent other parts of Thanet, residents in other parts of Thanet, saying, well, why Ramsgate, why not us? But the reality is we have to make a coherent bid. We have to make a bid that addresses the particular criteria that the government have put down. And sometimes this is going to mean that we can't make a bid which is what the residents would entirely like, because these things are shaped by government and we have to play the game. We have to meet their criteria, because we can have a lovely bid which satisfies, which has something for everyone in it, but if we don't get the money, then it's just a waste of time. And I know when this bid was launched, one of the first things we did was speak to the two Conservative MPs who were both supportive. Obviously, Craig McKinley was more interested in it than Roger Gale, which is fair enough because it affects his constituency. And, you know, I haven't heard anything tonight which suggests that the new administration is going to divert the focus of its efforts away from Ramsgate. And I welcome that, because I think people in Ramsgate would not understand if that happened. And there would be a risk really of considerably alienating Ramsgate from this council if there was any diversion. I would say in terms of transparency, I think the timescales for this are extremely challenging. This isn't the same structure as the Towns Fund bid. There can't be the same level of transparency, and I think it's great we've had the engagement from people in Ramsgate. I'm really excited about this opportunity, and I hope that you will take it forward with the same enthusiasm that we would, and it will be a big win for everybody in Thanet, not just people in Ramsgate. Thanks.
Yes, thanks, Councillor Everett. Yes, it's important. Ramsgate is an important factor within the Thanet community, and the job of the Cabinet is to look for opportunities for the whole of Thanet, which obviously includes Ramsgate. And I'm sure that the Conservative government will be offering up more funds as we go through, so we can attack those as and when they come up with gusto, and we will have the knowledge obviously through putting these together. So I'll hand over to Chief Executive if you'd like to say a few words.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Leader. I have to say, obviously, officers, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Director of Regeneration and myself, are absolutely supportive of this submission. I totally recognise the additional recommendation this evening around actually the TDC reassuring itself that we're not making any financial contribution, because obviously that would not be appropriate. But I think regardless of that, this is a massive opportunity for the district and for Ramsgate, and it has got some very exciting projects in it which are entirely deliverable within the very short, I have to say, delivery period of 3 years. But I welcome the general support from members on this. I think this is absolutely the right thing to do. And I just also want to say thank you to the Director of Regeneration, who has had to work really hard to get this within the very short timescales. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to move this, and do I have a seconder? Councillor Bayford. So are we all in agreement, Cabinet? Agreed. Okay, Charles? So we move on to item 5, cost and financing of disciplinary and grievance matters. To introduce Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Leader. Retrospective Cabinet approval is required for legal costs of approximately £247,000 incurred to date and associated with ongoing disciplinary and grievance proceedings. Cabinet members are also asked to approve resources to facilitate the current plan for these proceedings, as future costs are estimated in the region of £450,000 to £486,000. An urgent decision outside the budget framework, the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny has been informed and has given consent for the matter to be dealt with by Cabinet. A report will be brought to the next meeting of the Council on the 15th of July. Cabinet members will see that there are 4 recommendations within the report before them this evening, and can I just say that the report rightly sets out that it is the responsibility of the Council's General Purpose Committee and its Investigations and Disciplinaries Subcommittee to consider the substance of these matters. As such, this report only addresses the necessary approval of budget required for the costs incurred to date and anticipated future costs. I would also ask the Cabinet to note the concerns of the Director of Finance in regards to affordability. I will go on to move the recommendations, but as a member of the GPC and Chairman of the IDSC, I will defer all questions on this matter to officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Speaking under 20.1, I have Councillor Garner.
Thank you. I'd like to start by welcoming the fact that this report has been published and made available for this evening's meeting, so that the residents of Thanet are able to see how much these ongoing disciplinary and grievance matters have cost them so far and how much more they are likely to cost in the future. Now is not necessarily the time to discuss how we got here, but now is the time to consider how we best minimise our financial exposure going forward. We all know that we as a council can ill afford to further deplete our already much reduced financial reserves, so we ought to be investigating all options to reduce future costs as much as possible. The report states that while 22,000 of costs so far has been extended on external employment tribunals, it is anticipated that in future these tribunals may account for 408,000. I would assume that this is a conservative, with a small c, estimate, and could also increase significantly. While I understand, as Councillor Saunders mentioned, that the GPC and the IDSC are responsible for the course of the current grievance and disciplinary matters, I would like to ask who is responsible for making decisions about the future direction that this whole process is going to take external to TDC, and ask them to confirm that all options are being actively considered. Thank you.
On the basis that Councillor Saunders is obviously Chair IDSC, I think we need to refer that to Estelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Leader. Thank you, Councillor Garner. So I think your question was, who is responsible on the employment tribunals for making decisions on their progress? I think was that correct? Okay, so any matters below the level of chief officer level, any matters to do with the employment would be the remit of the head of paid service, who's chief executive. So any decisions on any employment tribunal in respect of a more junior member of staff would sit with the chief executive. If the chief executive is unable to deal with it for any reason, she would delegate it to an appropriate senior officer. Any employment tribunals to do with more senior officers obviously can't be dealt with by, ordinarily would be dealt with by the head of paid service, but if that's not possible, would be the remit of the GPC as the appropriate body to give direction.
Thank you, Estelle. Next speaker under 20.1, Councillor Yates.
Thank you, Chair. Just as a bit of background to this report, I was a Cabinet Member for Finance during the time where this report came out. So I did have concerns about what these legal costs were. So I asked the question, what are the costs, what have they been, and what are they forecast to be? And I'm glad that, as previous Councillor Garner has mentioned, that around I'm glad that this is being made public. I'm glad about the transparency when it comes to taxpayers' money. The 750k approximate represents about 4% of 1 year's general budget, and this money will be coming from the general budget. And this, because the money will be coming out of reserves, this does mean that future cost savings or revenue generations will have to be considered to recover our reserves. So it's quite a serious situation. Next, I'd just like to highlight that although we're discussing this, I fully respect the IDSE process and the ongoing work done by the GPC. So in no way is this attempted to influence any of that. But this is purely, we need to make these numbers public. So I guess my two questions are: is it possible the IDSC can be provided with regular commercial and financial updates on cost to date and forecast spend? Because I think that's an important piece of information that the IDSC will need to consider, and the GPC. And my second question is, given that £408,000 is a huge amount of money to be spent on 2 employment tribunals, our alternative approach is being considered by the GPC to achieve best value for taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you. Estelle, if you'd just like to confirm that we will, on the basis that the financial report has generated through the channels, that you are quite willing to continuously update the GPC and the IDSC on ongoing costs?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's important to consider that there have to be proper processes, and we are following the proper processes, the GPC and the IDSC, absolutely, and we're following the processes for all concerned correctly. But there's no reason that they can't be updated with costs, and it's appropriate for them to know. But obviously, their decision on steps to take and ways to go forward, you know, obviously they have to balance costs, but also they have to, for all concerned, follow the proper processes. But of course, they have to take into account it's a balance, and yes, I think it would be appropriate for them to be updated regularly on the costs position.
Thank you. And I'd also like to reassure that every effort will be made to try and mitigate the costs for the Employment Tribunal. We are obviously only 5 days into this administration, so we can have a full look at the whole situation and we will come back on any possibility of improving that situation. Councillor Towning, you wish to speak under 20.1.
Thank you, Leader. Well, much of my questions have been answered by Rob over there. What I'd just like to understand is that when did we, whoever was responsible, actually find out, at what point did they discover the actual level of legal costs, and you know what was done about it? I mean, we're hearing now that okay, we ought to update the very good work that's being done in looking into the investigation of what disciplinary matters. But surely this is something that, in order to control something as big as this, and the cost of lawyers and barristers is enormous, that this should be part and parcel of any arrangement like this, so that the committee doesn't get carried away from the runaway costs. And I would endorse that that's what should be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Towning. I think you'll find that your questions are mostly covered in the report that was offered up by Chris Blundell. I don't know if you wish to elaborate any more on that, Chris, or whether you feel that your explanation in the report sufficiently answers Councillor Towning's question.
Thank you, Chair. No, I agree. The report sets out the timeline associated with the development of costs.
Thank you. So, Councillor Saunders, you have moved. I have a seconder. Oh, sorry. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Didn't look at my notes. Sorry, Councillor Bailey. Sorry, you wish to speak. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of what I've wanted to say has actually been said, but just a quick couple of questions, if I may. One, will any of this expenditure be recoverable through costs awarded subject to any outcome of any hearing so that the council can recoup some of this public money? And secondly, I understand that it's the remit of the IDSC and GPC to determine the level of legal support they require. However, are these costs monitored, or has a ceiling been set, or can they just spend ad infinitum? Thank you.
Estelle, I think you need to ask about the cost recoverable and also the ceiling on expenditure.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, Councillor Bailey. Unfortunately, if we're talking about employment tribunal claims, costs are generally not recoverable. So that's the unfortunate situation. It's important to bear in mind in this report that we have presented sort of the worst case scenario. So yes, it is expensive what we've incurred so far. Future costs are even more expensive, but they are the future, you know, what could happen. There could be all sorts of things before then, so that's important to remember. In terms of a ceiling, we haven't imposed a ceiling. Obviously, beyond this report sets out certain figures. You know, we're not there yet. We haven't gone beyond that, etc., etc. And I think so. We haven't set a ceiling, but I think the point earlier about giving regular reports on where we are with costs, etc., etc., will help the appropriate people dealing with it, committees, to, you know, consider how they deal with things and to have those costs in mind. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Estelle. So, sorry, we'll ask you to move it again, please.
Yes, thank you. Can I just say that I do welcome recording the legal costs. Both myself as chair of IDSC and the leader as chair of General Purpose Committee are aware of the sort of costs we're talking about. What I can't do as chairman as IDSC is allow my committee to be influenced by cost. They need to follow due process. It's a very, very complicated legal matter, and I wouldn't want to think that we were taking shortcuts that would come back and bite us at a later date because we've been influenced by cost. Thank you. I move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saunders. Do I have a seconder?
Second, Chair.
Are we all in agreement of the recommendations? Agreed? Okay. So thank you, members. I believe this concludes the business for tonight's meeting, and I declare the meeting closed at 7:30. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.